Hey, are you okay, ma'am? The small voice startled her. Madeline spun around, blinking through the drizzle. The boy couldn't have been older than 6 or 7, skinny, drenched, with a backpack twice his size and a rusty bike leaning against the guardrail. Steam rose from the hood of her Mercedes, the smell of burnt oil thick in the rain. I think my car's dead, she muttered, frustration edging her tone. And I can't get a signal. Ethan squinted at the smoking hood like he'd seen it all before. Pop it open, he said simply, stepping forward. His sneakers squelched in the puddles. Madeline hesitated, then pulled the latch. The hood lifted with a groan. The boy didn't flinch at the rising heat or hiss of steam. He leaned in, his little fingers tracing along wires and hoses, wiping moisture away with his sleeve. Madeline's umbrella sagged in her hand as she watched, this small, soaked child moving with surprising confidence and calm. Try it now, he said. She slid into the seat and turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, then came alive with a low, steady rumble. She blinked, stunned. When she stepped out, Ethan was already closing the hood, his grin quick and shy. How on earth did you do that? She asked. My dad fixes cars, he said. I help sometimes. Madeline reached into her purse, pulled out $100 bill, and held it toward him. You just saved me a headache. Please, take this. Ethan shook his head, water dripping from his hair. Dad says you don't take money for helping people stuck in the rain. The words hit her harder than expected. Something about the quiet pride in his voice, the kind that came from being taught right, not rich, made her throat tighten. Well, she said softly, your dad sounds like a good man. He is, Ethan said, smiling wide. Best there is. She couldn't let him pedal away hungry. How about lunch instead? He brightened instantly. Can I bring my dad? He likes fried chicken. Minutes later, the three of them sat in a booth at a tiny diner that smelled like grease and comfort. Ethan devoured drumsticks, talking with his mouth half full, describing how he once built a toy car from a milk carton. Madeline laughed, genuinely, for the first time in weeks. Jack Cole sat across from her, broad-shouldered, tired-eyed, hands rough from years of work. He spoke little, but every word carried honesty. When Ethan dropped a fry, Jack wiped the table without a sigh, just patient care. Thank you for the meal, Jack said. Madeline smiled. Thank you for raising a boy who'd stop for a stranger in the rain. Jack's lips twitched. He's better than I deserve. Ethan grinned. Dad's the best mechanic ever. He fixes anything. Her gaze lingered on Jack's calloused hands and the quiet steadiness in his voice. You run a shop nearby? Small place off Maple Street, he said. Keeps the lights on. And Ethan's mom? He looked down. Passed when he was 2. Silence wrapped around the table like a soft curtain. Ethan, oblivious, hummed while licking ranch from his fingers. Madeline watched the father's quiet strength, the son's bright innocence, and something in her shifted. After they finished eating, she should have left. She had investors waiting, meetings stacked, a life polished down to minutes. But as she stood under the diner's awning, rain whispering against the roof, she didn't want to go. Ethan raced ahead to fetch his bike, leaving Madeline and Jack alone. He ever stop moving? She asked, smiling. Jack chuckled. Only when he's asleep. Madeline tilted her head. You've done a good job, Jack. He shrugged, modest. I just fix what breaks. Cars, toys, hearts, same rules. Patience and the right tools. The next day, Madeline canceled her meetings and drove to Maple Street. She told her assistant it was a logistics check. Ethan waved from the garage, a wrench in hand, face smeared with grease and joy. Inside, Jack worked beneath a pickup, radio humming softly. The place was cluttered, warm, alive with honest work. Madeline stepped outside to take a call, but stopped mid-sentence. Through the rain-streaked window, she saw Jack kneeling beside an old wheelchair. A frail man sat nearby, watching. Jack adjusted the brake lever carefully, refusing the folded bill the old man tried to give him. You need it more than I do, Mr. Harris, he said gently. Just making sure you're safe. When the man left, a thin gray cat limped into the shop. Jack crouched again, opened a can of tuna, and set it down like it was the most natural thing in the world. Madeline's chest tightened. She had built her empire on style, ambition, and grit. But in this small garage, surrounded by the smell of oil and rain, she saw something rarer than wealth. She saw grace. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like the one doing the helping. She felt like the one being saved. The cat crept forward, wary, ribs showing beneath its fur. Jack set the can of tuna on the floor and stepped back, letting the animal decide. Rain pattered against the roof of the garage. The cat sniffed once, twice, then began to eat, slow at first, then desperately. Jack crouched beside it, quiet, patient. His hands, rough, lined with oil, moved with impossible gentleness as he brushed a hand over its back. "You're safe now," he whispered. Madeline watched from the doorway, her reflection faint in the glass. He didn't see her. He wasn't performing, not trying to impress. He was just kind. Something in that, his stillness, his quiet decency, made her chest ache in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Come see my secret fort." Ethan's voice broke through her trance. He grabbed her hand, tugging her toward a corner of the garage stacked with old tires, scrap wires, and soda caps. "It's a robot base," he said proudly, pointing to a tower made from broken radios and bent spoons. Madeline crouched beside him, laughing as he explained each piece, every imaginary battle. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until she laughed, and the sound felt like sunlight through clouds. As the afternoon dimmed, she stood by her car, watching the scene before her. Jack wiped his hands on a rag, thoughtful, head lowered. Ethan sat cross-legged on the pavement, drawing cars with chalk. The moment felt ordinary, yet she couldn't shake the sense that she was standing on the edge of something she didn't understand. She got in the car, looked at her phone. An investor's name flashed on the screen. She locked it, set it face down, and drove away. Back in the city, her life resumed like clockwork. Emails, contracts, boardrooms, red carpets. Madeline Hart, the unstoppable visionary behind Hart and Company. Every move calculated, every answer ready. Yet every night, when the city went still, her mind drifted to a small boy with syrup on his cheek and a man whose silence spoke more than any pitch meeting ever could. She told herself it was curiosity, gratitude, maybe. But when her Mercedes stalled one gray afternoon in her company's parking lot, her hands moved before her mind caught up. She didn't call roadside service. She called him. Jack Cole. The number read, saved quietly weeks ago under Ethan's dad. He arrived half an hour later in a beat-up pickup, sleeves rolled, calm as ever. "Pop the hood," he said simply. No pretense, no small talk. Just work. She stepped back and watched, feeling strangely safe. When the car finally roared to life again, she hesitated. "You have time for coffee?" she asked. Jack looked at her like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. "Coffee? There's a cafe across the lot. Nothing fancy," she said, suddenly nervous. "It's where I go when I need to breathe." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Sure." The cafe smelled of roasted beans and rain-soaked pavement. They sat by the window. Madeline found herself telling him things she'd never said aloud. The betrayal of her business partner, the exhaustion behind the praise, the loneliness in a room full of admiration. Her voice cracked once. Just once. Jack didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice or platitudes. He just said, "Sounds like you've been strong for too long." That was all. But it was everything. When they left, the sky was darkening. Her heels slipped on the slick curb. In an instant, his hands caught her, firm, steady, one at her waist, one at her arm. Their eyes met. Neither moved. "Sorry," she whispered. He smiled faintly. No harm done. They laughed too quickly, breaking the moment. But something lingered in the air between them. An unspoken question neither dared ask. She kept finding reasons to drive by the garage after that. At first, she blamed it on her brakes, her battery, her need for fresh air. But more and more, she came just to be there. Ethan always ran to greet her. "Hey, it's the chicken lady," he'd yell, the nickname born from their first meal together. She'd roll her eyes, pretending to protest, but she secretly loved it. Jack grew easier around her, his quiet humor surfacing in small smiles and dry remarks. He started brewing an extra cup of coffee whenever her car pulled up. They talked about everything and nothing, the ache of loss, the joy of small victories, the absurdity of fame. Madeline confessed that sometimes success felt like living inside a golden cage. Jack told her about fixing things because it made him feel useful, like he could hold the world together one bolt at a time. They never called it friendship. They didn't need to. It was there in the silence between them, the kind that didn't need filling. One evening, She arrived to find the shop quiet. Jack looked up from an engine, worry lining his face. "Ethan's sick," he said. "Fever." Madeline dropped her purse. "Let me help." That night, she sat by the boy's bed, cool cloth in hand, reading softly until his breathing evened. When Ethan stirred, he whispered, "Miss Madeline, don't go." She smiled through tears she hadn't expected. "I'm right here." Jack stood in the doorway, watching. He didn't speak, didn't move. But in his eyes, something changed, a quiet awe, a recognition. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains. Madeline stood at the counter buttering toast while Jack poured coffee. Ethan sat at the table, laughing between bites. For a fleeting moment, it felt like a family. Jack set down the mug, his voice low. "You don't belong in this life, Madeline. Not like this." She looked up. "Maybe this life's the only one that ever made sense. I don't want you to lose everything because of us," he said quietly. "Maybe everything I had wasn't worth keeping." He didn't answer, but when she brushed her hand against his, he didn't pull away. Then came the photo. A grainy tabloid shot. Madeline Hart, billionaire designer, walking out of a dusty auto shop in jeans and flats beside a mechanic with grease on his hands. The headline screamed, "From runway to rust. Has Madeline Hart lost her edge?" The internet feasted. The board demanded an emergency meeting. "Madeline," one of them began, "this relationship is a distraction." She stared across the glossy table. "Not to me. It undermines the brand," another said. "Empowerment, elegance, this isn't the image we sell." She folded her hands. "You mean it makes me human?" "Investors are nervous," someone added. "We need to handle this." "Handle it," she repeated. "You'll issue a statement. Express regret. Reaffirm the company's values. Distance yourself publicly." Madeline stood, voice calm, sure. "If my company can't accept who I am or who I care about, it's not mine anymore." Silence. Then she took off her ID badge and set it on the table. "I resign." No press conference. No apology. Just a choice. Days later, the world moved on. The headlines faded. But Madeline didn't. She slept better. Smiled easier. Wore sneakers because she wanted to. She launched the Ethan Project, a scholarship fund for kids in need of STEM programs. She visited schools, spoke to classrooms, and built something that mattered more than fashion ever did. When an empty lot near Jack's shop went up for sale, she bought it quietly. Months later, the Colehart Training Center opened, offering trade education to teens who needed a second chance. One bright afternoon, Madeline was reviewing blueprints when she heard a voice that made her heart leap. "Miss Madeline, Dad's fixing my bike again," Ethan yelled, running across the lot. She turned, and there he was. Jack, crouched by a bike, sun catching in his dark hair, the same gentle steadiness in his eyes. He looked up, met her gaze, and smiled. Neither spoke at first. She walked closer. Ethan raced off to show his painted robot, leaving them in a pool of sunlight and silence. Jack stood, wiping his hands. She stepped closer. His hand found hers. His other brushed a stray hair from her cheek. Then he kissed her, quietly, honestly, as if they'd both been holding their breath for months. Madeline closed her eyes, not because she was uncertain, but because for the first time in her life, she didn't need to think. She just felt. A year later, the garage was unrecognizable. Fresh paint, organized tools, a sign out front, Colehart Center, learn, build, grow. Teenagers came every day to learn, to fix, to dream. Jack taught them. Madeline ran the programs. Ethan, now in first grade, told everyone his mom used to be a fashion queen, but now she made robot schools and pancakes. He still called her Chicken Lady. Madeline Hart no longer wore armor made of ambition. She wore laughter, simplicity, freedom. That afternoon, Ethan rolled a toy car down the porch steps, laughing. Madeline watched from the swing while Jack wiped his hands and walked toward her. "All I wanted that day was someone to fix my car," she said, smiling. "And I just wanted to help a stranger," he replied. Ethan barreled into them, hugging them both tight. "Now we're a team," he shouted. Madeline laughed, meeting Jack's eyes over their son's head. And for the first time, she realized love didn't always arrive wrapped in roses or applause. Sometimes it came in oil-stained hands, in a child's laughter, in rain that led you exactly where you needed to be. A mechanic, a former CEO, and a little boy who believed in kindness more than anything. Together, they built something stronger than success. They built home.